Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Connection Podcast. I am Sally. I'm your host back again. Yes, I continue to come back and continue to hope that I have new listeners. And I am super, super excited, as I always am, with my guests. Today I have Karen Rontowski, and she is a comic and a tarot reader and paranormal and all the things. And I am so freaking excited. And of course, if you've been listening to me, you know we can swear on this podcast. So just everybody be aware of that. But I'm so super excited. I met Karen just through my breath work and through the gym and through a place that I have my office at Move Breathe Live. And yeah, we kind of crossed paths, and I had seen her in the periphery because she is a local, but has what do I want to say? She is local currently in the Utica area where I am, but she has a wide span of where she goes and what she does. And I feel so honored and blessed to have her here today. And she's funny as hell. And so I can't wait to see what we're going to uncover today here with Karen. So welcome, Karen. Um, I'm going to let you kind of introduce, like, because you got a lot of hats and you do a lot of things and you've been a lot of places. And I know that you're local right now with us in my town, but this isn't your end point. So yeah, bring it all for the listeners today, because I know this is going to be juicy and exciting.
Well, good. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I really appreciate it. And you were so great on my podcast. So this is wonderful. And you can see I have my Alice in Wonderland coffee cup. How's your coffee problem?
I love it. I love it. I love it.
So it's very funny to talk about connection because I'm that sort of introvert, extrovert, a little of both. But I've spent the last
Me too.
35 years on the road doing stand up. And then during the day when I'm home, I read tarot. And then I put them together for a show called Psychic Stand Up, where I do it all together. But I am in Utica for the moment. I think I'm a California girl, but I came out here to take care of two parents with dementia. And finally just sort of had that. So my dad passed a little bit ago. And then my mom we just got her in memory care. So things should change, get a little easier. But I'm going to be just a kind of the hermit card. I'm going to be a wanderer for a little bit. Starting in June, I'm going out on the road and I'm just driving. And I was like, I don't want to live anywhere. When I came out here, I got rid of everything I owned except what fit in the car. And I stayed like that. So, and I live in the house, I live in a little bit of a bizarre house, but it's furnished. So I was like, I'll take it. Like, I don't have to buy anything. So starting in June, it was funny because I said, I'm just gonna, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna drive around. I'm gonna see. And I had friends call me and they're like, hey, do you want to house sit? And another friend was like, I have two houses and we're not in that one. You want to stay in that one? So right now, my summer is just unfolding. I have all these comedy dates, and then how I get there and where I stay in between is just going to be fun.
Oh my God, that's so amazing. And how much freedom with that. Especially, we were talking about before we hit the record button, there's always like a little good snag of information that happens before we hit the record button whenever I'm recording. And we were kind of laughing about, not laughing at me, but laughing about like my hat, like what's up with my hat situation. And I'm going gray, and Karen was like sharing with me how she's already gone gray and her hair looks beautiful. But I have this obsessive when I'm looking at the Zoom camera, my demarcation, but I don't want to give up because I speak to so many women about the freedom
Mhm.
of when they go gray. And so I just got to bring that in a little bit, but also the freedom of being able, after you really, there's so much packed into taking care of parents, right? As we move on in our life and then we create this life, whatever that is, whether it's family, whether it's kids, whether it's career, and then things change when we sometimes have to come back. And that is really something like really beautifully to be honored. And now to have that bit of freedom back to just get on the road and travel and decide what's going to happen with that. Like, where are the connections going to land? Where are you going to land? And not having a specific plan, which would make some people crazy, but for you, it sounds like there's just a lot of freedom in being able to expand and find space and decide how that's gonna land for you. I
Mhm.
kinda love it because we are in a different space. I don't know your age, but my age, right? I just turned 59, so,
Oh, when I'm 58.
yeah, so I'm gonna be 60 next year, right? But it's a number and it's just an interesting part of our life, right? Like where can we go with this part of our life and where do we have to be and where can we create space? And so I just kind of love that piece of probably where you started and now where you are and what you've given up to be here. Um, and now your ability to just move through time and space, however it feels good for you. And you'll kind
Yeah.
of intuitively decide like where you wanna land, or
Well,
if
you
you
know,
wanna
it's
land, and if you
right.
wanna land and how long that'll be. So, yeah, I love that.
Well, it's funny because once I tried to go gray or kind of white. I like my white. And when I lived in Los Angeles, and I thought my friends were going to have an intervention. There were some of them that came at me that were like, "You can't do this," and then
Oh
I
my
came.
god, I can't believe you're saying that. I was out to dinner the other night, and if they're either of those ladies are listening, they'll probably but I'm not picking on them. But I have to say I was out to dinner the other night, and it kinda happened a little, and then, I've had other people, even my mother-in-law, love her, 87, I think 87, I don't wanna get that wrong, her birthday is this weekend. Maybe she's gonna be 88, but she was like, "So,
What are you doing?
yeah, what are you doing?" And then, you get a lot of like, "Wow, I'm just not there yet. You're so courageous." And
Yeah.
what I hear is, I can't believe this is what I hear. I don't know if this is what they're saying because I have this issue, what I hear and what people are saying. But I get a little bit like I feel like they're saying, "Oh my god, I can't believe you're doing that."
Right, right. And it's so funny that that's thought of as courageous. You know what's courageous? Anyone living with their parents taking care of them. That's courageous. Their hair is nothing. And it's a funny thing because I have a joke in my act where I say, you know what happens when you let your hair go gray? You can go behind the counter at Denny's and no one says a word.
That's
Everyone just goes, I think that's the owner's wife. So it has that, like a lot more people call me ma'am, but you know what? I can't. There was this. I hate to say it this way because this is not all of it. Because I'm not a physic. I don't take that much pride in what I look like, probably to a fault. Like even in show business, sometimes people like, you should do a little better, Karen. But I try. But and if that's your art, if your art is your face and your hair, man, do it up. I think everybody's got their own art. That's not where my art falls. And not only I'm like a real organic person, and years ago, my hair is thin, but it's back. Like it really thinned, and I started with Rogaine, and it just ruined my head. Like I'm really clear now. I'm kind of part of the no poo movement where you use different shampoos that don't have sulfates. And I love my hair. I love what it feels like. I love what it looks like. And just in case that if you feel like you have to dye your hair, that's sort of a male oriented, am I going to look young and good for males or mates or whatever, how I'm supposed to look? They're going to be men no matter what. Don't worry. They're always there. They're not that worried about your hair color.
the funny thing
So,
is that I told you this story when my hairdresser, who we both know, when I wanted to go gray, one person in the hairdressers said, one sister said, I think maybe it's like, maybe have you thought about this? And I was like, yeah, actually, I have. The other sister, and I go to the hairdresser. They're probably not listening to this, but
no, no, no. They're not my.
Steel Magnolias Italian style. That's what it is. It is like insanity what happens where at my hairdressers. And like the one owner was so mad. She was like so mad at me and mad at her sister. There was a lot of fighting in Italian. I don't know what they were saying about me. And but yeah, I mean my husband has been bugging me for like 2 years. He's like, "I think you should just go gray." And I was like a little
Mhm.
opposed. But so I mean honestly having that, that little bit of like extra, I guess, like yeah, just let's like go for it. And yeah, you don't ever know how it's really going to look. All I can say is that I really am trying to embrace this stage of my life and the freedom that it brings instead of the worry that the rest of my life has brought in my healing journey. And it isn't about just letting myself go, but I have a story that I was a nurse at the bedside. It's many, many moons ago. I was pretty young. I'm in my 30s. I don't think I was a bad looking person, but I had this patient and he just to set the stage for him, you know, God bless him, he has passed. So I don't think I'm breaking any HIPAA laws here. I'm not mentioning his name. But he was had a little bit of a maybe an alcohol issue, and he used to go from bar to bar in his, scooter, his whatever we called them then, they were always a advertised, but the scooter, right? An electric wheelchair.
Mhm.
And, one night I was working the night shift, and I went into his room, and I was taking care of him, and he had been, coming quite a bit, so I kinda knew him. And he said to me one night, "You know, I gotta tell you something. If you cleaned yourself up a little bit, put a little makeup on, you might not be half bad." And I thought, what the what are you serious right now? And I have never forgotten that story because I don't wear a lot of makeup and I am like you were kind of talking about, like I think I take care of myself, but I'm not obsessive about that stuff. And maybe I should be, because
No.
apparently my friend that was driving the scooter from Legion to Legion. Um, yeah, he thought I needed to clean up a little bit, fix myself up. I still always remember that story. It always makes me laugh. So he's always with me. But I still haven't gotten obsessive about how I look. And I have seen so many women that have gone gray and they are like loving. They say they are never going back. And I have seen some women with some beautiful gray hair, younger than me, 40s. They do not look old to me. Your hair does not have to be short, as everybody says. You have to cut it
Mhm.
short or you look witchy. Well, I don't know. I'm partially witchy anyway, so I'm like, whatever. Maybe this is what I was always supposed to do. But yeah, that's what people say. You're so courageous. I am not there yet. And I do not hear courage when I when I hear that.
No,
But I guess
I
that's the
hear comfort.
perception.
It's comfort, right?
Yeah,
I feel
I just don't want to diet anymore. It's too much. And
I have
maybe
a
I'll go
suggestion
gray and
too.
then it'll be like, "Oh god, I really this doesn't look good on me," and then maybe I'll have to diet again, but I you can't really tell until you do it.
No, and I have a suggestion for anybody. Like there is this henna, and it's not, so I know a little bit about this because I really have messed up my hair a lot. It's all natural and it's called Surya, Surya. And it's not, when you do regular henna, there's a metallic that gets on your head that you can't dye it then. It's very, then your hair will fall out very tacky. This Surya is like only berries and I don't know what's
Hmm,
in it, but it dyes your hair for about a week and no longer. And I did that once the first time I was trying because it washes out. But I always thought I would just buy another box if I wanted to see what it looked like. But I would use that before. I'm like I said, I'm getting, chemicals are getting crazy and just feeling better on my head. Like it
yeah,
not like I had bumps and welts and I was like, whoa, what are those? Those are worse. But there is a freedom about not caring, and sometimes it makes you better looking, that energy. But there's a thing called face blindness, and I think there's a combination of that and what people project,
mhm,
because it sounds like the age of that man was a time when women were like, I still have friends and I cringe when they kind of feel like women are dressing for them. You're
yeah,
supposed to, this is about me, the guy, not about what you want to wear. And that's a very old, I think that's on its way out. I'm so happy with the new, younger generation. But the first part is that you didn't put on makeup for him. That's the first part.
right,
And the second part was, my sister has dark skin. She's 5'2". I'm 5'9". She has dark hair. I have white hair. People confuse us all the time. And there is no, like, you could go look at us and go, oh, I see how you're sisters, but like this much. And it's always will baffle me how I think that, like I said, that guy was projecting on you, or my friend that was like ready to hold an intervention. she was all about her looks. So I'm a threat to her if I don't care about my looks. So you kind of have to take
Yeah,
in it
yeah,
all
my
in
mother-in-law
proportion,
still
you know?
she's gonna I think I don't wanna be wrong, but her birthday's this weekend. She's gonna be, I think, 88, and, I could have that wrong, but she'll let me know if she's listening. But she's still dyeing her hair, and, God love it, that's beautiful, but,
That's her thing. That's great.
I'm just not into it anymore. I have to go so often in my hair, and I just wanna see, like, how this will look, because I have been enamored with other women, like, I got some girl like, I saw this one woman, I was doing Reiki at a retreat. She has no idea the impact she on me. She came in for me to do Reiki, and I was like, had a little girl crush. I'm like, "Holy mackerel, your hair is amazing." She was probably like, "Who is this weirdo that I'm gonna lay on the table and she's gonna do Reiki on me in this tent now?" Her hair was long, it was thick, it was beautiful gray. And I was just in awe. I was like, "Wow, if my hair could look like that." And not that I wanted to look like her. I wanna look like me, right? But I just wanna not have to worry about getting my hair dyed every 3 or 4 weeks because I never go
Oh my
the
God.
time frame. I don't go
Yes,
when I'm
and
supposed to, so it looks like shit anyway because it's partially grown out all the time, so
well, you know what too? You do have that great thick hair. I have thin hair, so it's a little more work, but I still love it. But the uh like I said, I could get it maybe if I ended up on a TV show or something where they were like, you have to dye it. I probably wouldn't still, but I don't. Anyways, Hollywood's like a different. If you want to pay for it, but here's the thing, mine was every 2 weeks. Dyed hair looked good for a week. That's all it looked good for on me, and then there was white coming out, and there was nothing you could do. And I was dye. I had to dye my hair like at least once a month for the roots because it grew so fast,
yeah,
and that's a lot of
it is
chemicals.
a lot of chemicals. And I've been gray. I think my first gray hair was, like, in my mid-20s.
Me too. 25. Yep.
Yeah, I was young when they started popping out. These people that are, like, in their 50s and they still barely have they're like, "Oh, I have a gray hair." They have, like, 1 gray hair. I'm like, "Yeah, that was me at 24."
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It is a freedom. And so I always do a little numerology with my tarot. And I'm in a personal numerological year 5. And fives are where you two things. It's very interesting that I'm almost free now because with every year you kind of go with the positive and the negative of that. And fives are about, do you feel free or do you feel trapped? And to me, freedom is the less maintenance. I don't want to have to, just whatever, getting in my car with just what I own. That's freedom to me right now. It may not be next year because next year is about home. Next year 6 is about home and love. So I may have roots next year. But right now, freedom, like anything that makes me feel trapped, I almost feel like I'm choking.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
is the birth month and day of what is the month and day of your birthday?
The day is 19, the month is 3. I just
Okay,
had
so
my
three,
birthday.
19. So that's 1, 4, and 8 is 12, and you are in a 3. Okay. You are in the perfect year to start a podcast. Okay. Because you're going into a 4. No, you're going into a 3. Okay. What if people, I do personal year is what I do when I do a reading with someone. And then you add sideways the month and the day and the year that of your next birthday, you're going into a 3. 3 is all about groups. It's about, I don't belong to this group anymore. I belong to this group. It's great for creativity, bringing groups in. In my 3, my group went from California to New York. It was that big. So it's a wonderful time for you to be doing this. And you'll find, like I said, I don't really belong over here anymore. I belong over here. This last year that you were in was your 2. It was all one on ones, interpersonal. I don't connect here, I connect here. So you'll find that this year is great for your podcast.
Yeah, that's interesting because there is a lot of change because, yeah, probably about a year and a half ago, I don't even know how long now, I'm bad with times and numbers, but, I left my corporate job. So the hospital, and there was a lot of grief around like losing people and losing those groups. But now I keep
Was
finding
that
these,
possibly 3 years ago?
maybe it was almost 3 years ago.
That
Yeah,
would have
it
been a
probably
9.
started 3 years ago. Like the changes started 3 years ago, and then Yeah, and there's a lot of grief around that for people. Like we always think grief is just for death of like a death of a loved one, but grief is so much bigger than that. Um, and interestingly, I've been brought to a lot of people have been coming to me with grief, which I'm not a grief coach or counselor, but in my sphere, I've been seeing like these different groups, as you're saying, coming in to my sphere. And I'm like, oh, that is so interesting. At first, I don't even notice it. And then you're like, hmm, that's interesting.
Everybody's
I have
never.
4 or 5
Yeah.
one-on-one clients, and they all have this severe grief they're dealing with. They didn't come to me for that. They came to me for other stuff. And so starting to put all that together, and even in this connection podcast, like when I even came up with the name connection, it was really all about like people I feel so disconnected sometimes, or people feel disconnected, or people are wanting connection. And does the computer create this connection or the disconnection? Because I think it's both. And what are
Mhm.
people really searching for? And then I've only, I think, I don't know, I'm 12 or 13 episodes in, but I have met the most amazing people doing things that I wouldn't even have met. I would have never met them before. I talked to a guy this week from Syracuse out near us, and he does community, he's real estate, but he does this shared space community spaces where people live in community but they have shared spaces. And he was
Mm.
so interesting and so um thought processes were so the same. I would have never met him if I didn't start this podcast. I don't know where that relationship will go, but it was so interesting. And the same with you. Like if I wouldn't get this probably deep with you, even though we've spent almost all this time talking about gray hair, right? But it's an organic podcast, so we just go where spirit takes us. And it
Well,
just
that was the top level
yeah,
of a
yeah,
deeper question about freedom.
yeah,
But I feel like, first of all, I want to say, because I have a paranormal podcast which you were on, but people were always talking about somatic breathing, and I never really like got it until I went to your class. And I wanted to say this in the beginning because your somatic breathing stuff is life changing. Like it really, here in Utica, since I kind of had the time and I'm kind of locked down, I was like, let's try all these things. But it was life changing. So it does
mm,
not surprise me that people would be sort of coming to you with grief issues or that they didn't know, because I feel like that's the time we're in. Also, we're peeling away layer. And what's interesting is I think connection, I don't want to get too predicty because I don't think that's your thing, but I think we're about to have it all fall apart and rebuild.
mhm.
And people are, we're learning the news disconnects us. There's a hate your neighbor. There seems to be this concerted effort to make you not like somebody. Even this, I was just talking today to somebody. I don't mind people being, there's a lot of people out there that are phonies, and there was kind of like, oh, okay, it's okay to expose. And then it was like, this is so negative. And now it's just this like, pull that
Yeah,
person down. And I was like, it's starting to just be like white noise in the back that's so negative that I think
yeah,
finding people to bring us back together is
mhm,
majorly important. I don't do politics or I might do a little spirituality in my comedy, but I don't really do any like that celebrity's a jerk or anything like that, because that's pulling us apart. So I think like let's all laugh at how silly Karen is, or how all this stuff. But I think you're right on target for what everybody needs right now.
yeah. We trying to think how I want to say this. When I was talking to his name was Troy Evans, yes, this week, creating these community spaces. He was saying at first that it was like he wasn't sure how it was going to land, and then people were really into it, like, divorced moms wanted to live in one building and this one. But then he was talking about how it's so great, and I believe this too, like to create the diversity in the building,
Mhm.
right? So if the community space, the community living room, when you come out of your apartment building, this community space is in the middle, like it was back in the day in indigenous times where there was a tribe, right? So everybody kind of took care of each other. So there were elders, there were people not working, there were people that were taking care of their neighbors' kids. There was people working, there were people, and I know people are like, oh, well, times are so different. I know, but I feel like the pendulum has swung so far the other way that we are just trying to tear each other down to make ourselves look better. And I have to tell you, in corporate a little bit, I was feeling that towards the end in my position because people were scrambling to be promoted and um not even their fault, I guess. It's just the world today. And then if you don't recognize it, you're really like tearing each other down to succeed when we should just be succeeding or connecting on our own merits and what we like about each other versus what we don't like. We're not all the same. Right? Like this is our turnaround in this human experience, however spiritual that sounds to people. But
Mhm.
in this body, this is my time right now. Like whether you believe you have another time or another time, I mean, I do, but right now, this is where I am. And so all that hatred and negativity, and I was getting to be kind of a negative Nelly person because of all my own anger. And then I did a lot of healing work, still doing that work and understanding like a lot of my stuff came from my younger self. But it's so much nicer to like love on people, but it's uncomfortable for people. People are like right now, like you're saying, all this stuff, like exposing everybody's last dirty detail. I'm not saying that like bad things aren't happening in the world and people should not get away with it. They shouldn't. But also, I do think sometimes, like, I could just say, oh, God, I met Karen and she did this, this, and this. And you're going to have to defend that. Like,
Right,
it's
right.
like crazy. And so we really need to get back to this community, this connection, this like self-love for ourselves and being like honest enough with ourselves to go have my hair go gray and not worry what other people are thinking. So that's a piece of self-love versus all that validation. And then that piece of community love of like being able to come in community and just laugh without you tearing everybody down. Um,
Yep.
there's
Yeah.
so much of that that I think we do need to rebuild. And I have a lot of faith that we maybe are starting, but I think it's going to have to crumble a little bit more. I agree before we start to rebuild. But there is a connection and a community piece that we need to do for all of us.
You know, there
Basically for our
that
salvation, honestly. I mean, whatever that means to people, right? Because we can't do it alone. We weren't meant to completely be lone wolves.
yeah, and it's funny that what he's talking about, because I have all these kind of woo-woo friends that are looking to buy land, and we're all going to have tiny houses, and we're all going to grow together. And there's a part of me that's like, that like I like what you were just describing, because I did live in an area that had a central area that really worked out great, and I think people are trying to find that sort of tribe community again. But I also think there's this like pulling the arrow back before it can go forward, because like a weird example, I don't have a judgment at all on Teal Swan. I don't know anything about her except a couple of her videos were very good. And then they did this documentary about her and everybody just went, "We hate her." And they didn't realize the people that did the documentary lived with her for 3 years and acted like her friend, and I was like, "I'm not watching this because I don't know who's worse. I don't know how you could spend 3 years with someone being a phony to do an I gotcha. Like what that whole thing, and then it gets clicks and then people go on it. So that kind of stuff just kind of makes me like, I don't know if we have documentaries anymore. We kind of just have hit jobs. There's my point, and I'm going to make sure you see it.
I was
But
telling my husband about something the other day, and he said to me, and he loves the news. And I don't necessarily love the news, but I'm not going to say that I don't get sucked up in some of the sensationalism
right.
stuff, right? So I would be a liar if I sat here and said I don't watch any of that. And I was saying something about a documentary I watched, and he's like, "You really?" He's like, "Who even knows anymore what like is true and what
Uh-huh.
is false?" And I watched that Teal Swan, and it was jarring. But again, like I guess if someone lived with me and
And showed
saw
the
me
worst of you. Yeah.
through their lens, I'm sure it would be jarring. Like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
someone lived and was documenting everything that I did for the last 10 years as I've evolved and made changes, I mean, even in my evolved self, I have days that are not great, right? Like, let's be honest, people.
Yes.
Like, let's be
Those
honest, like with
yes.
ourselves. And
Those
so when
those
someone's
videos of
documenting
those
all that,
Right, those videos, those women, or they just showed the women one, but I know it's everyone, where they lose their shit in the airport or something. I always lose my shit in the airport. And you know what? I sometimes it's, I feel like these people, they're going after them. They want their job. They go right to their boss. Like that's an awful lot of, hey, somebody had a bad day. You know what else? If that affected you that much, why didn't you write a letter to the company and say how good the person that took the shit from her was? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like it's so hard to do that. But it's funny because I've just been doing this thing called SSP, and it's a you do it every 2 weeks, and it's about resetting your nervous system. I don't even know what we're doing, but she's taking my nervous system out of living in constant fight or flight, which it's amazing. Almost everybody is living in that instead of safety.
Right.
And the more she gets this vagus nerve calmed down, the less judgmental I am. And I said one day after a session, she was like, "What did you think?" And I had seen this woman walk by my window while we were in the session. And I was like, my brain went, "Oh my God, look at that outfit. It's great. Look at how she did that." And I would, if I was out there, I'd tell her she looks great. And I said, this is a weird thing that happens. And there were, and usually my brain wouldn't have been that optimistic. And she said, that's what happens when you feel safe is things aren't threatening, things look beautiful. And I thought that's everybody's living like this, and that's why the work you're doing is so important. And I really, if you don't live near Sally, or go to a somatic breathing, it's really, you're just so great at what you do. I don't want to gush, but it really,
Thanks.
I think I went 3 or 4 times to your things, and I'll go again because there's this, I can't explain it, but things get fixed.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing as like there's so many of these modalities now. This SSP I'm not that familiar with. And but it is all about the nervous system regulation. And I always laugh because I've been a nurse for like 30 years now, but not, practicing in the hospital anymore. But I mean, all this knowledge and all this medical knowledge, and I've been around Western medicine, and really, we really never talked about nervous system regulation. And the
Yeah.
fact is, I was living in fight or flight and still have moments of that. And safety in the body, like we don't talk about that, but that is so important because it does create what we're doing day to day, like our day to day stuff, our reactions, how we're showing up, how we're in partnerships or not in partnerships, or whatever it is. I remember I used to walk around all the time feeling disrespected. And my husband used to say to me, like, what is that? I can't even, he couldn't even stand listening to me say I felt disrespected. But I honestly, in my heart, felt disrespected at work, with him, with whatever. But it was this armor that I have because I was so dysregulated. I did not feel safe in my body. I felt very judged. So then I was judgy because it's easier to judge
Mhm.
first, like, to lash out first before you're going to be lashed out, because that's how a lot of us lived. And now we live in this society, especially with social media, where it's on all the time. I mean, before you just got bullied at school, maybe in grade
Right.
school, like I did when I moved in eighth grade and got like, harassed. But then it was one and done. Like, there was the fight in the bathroom, and then luckily for me, it stopped. But if it was today, it would be going on and on and on. And I am guilty of, the scrolling, um, and saying I don't have time for something. And then if I looked at my phone, and I say this to my clients, like, okay, you tell me you're not having time to meditate or go to a breath work or do something nourishing for yourself or walk outside with your shoes off, but tell me how many hours you've scrolled. Because I know I'm guilty of
Mhm.
it. There
Yeah, me
is
too.
time because it's
Me
that we have constant chatter in our head, and so
Mhm.
it's almost impossible to get out of fight or flight, and that's why there's so much about in self-development world, which can also be addicting, let's just be honest.
Everything
um
can. Every
yeah,
too much of everything
right,
is
too
yeah.
much of anything. I just said this to a client, because I actually do the breath work online also. I have a group on Friday mornings, and I, do it through Zoom, and you think it couldn't be as effective, but it really is amazing. I love obviously in person because I love being with people, but I coach online. You do your stuff online probably. And I do breath online. But I was saying this morning, excess of anything is no good,
Mhm.
right? So even in the self-development world, when you're in that healing space, you have to be wary of like how much Am I just doing self-development, and how much am I just reading a book? One of my clients today was saying, she read a book for pleasure this week, and it was so nice. And she was saying it wasn't a self-development book, it wasn't this, and she's doing a lot of healing work, but you have to have balance is kind of a funny word because I wonder if we ever have balance.
Right.
But having things that make you feel good and give you joy and also doing your work, so that I even hate to call it work, but doing your stuff to peel your layers back so that you can have a regulated nervous system. Because the way you walk in the world, no matter which modality you're using, if you're getting to that place that feels better, you can trust, you feel safe. And for a lot of our listeners, I know I've talked about the safety before, and it is hard to like really even gauge what that is until you have somebody kind of guide you through and understand like the safety versus the non-safety in your body. But the non-safety shows up in a lot of triggering ways, a lot of judgment, a lot of anger, a lot of sadness. And life doesn't have to be that way. It
No,
just
it's a
doesn't.
feeling of being a feeling under attack all the time. And
Somebody's trying to get me.
yes, yes, and that's the house I grew up in.
Yeah,
So it's automatic to kind of feel like that.
me too.
But it's it really is. I feel like there's a time now that there's a time where you realize your shadow side. And then there's a time where you get so like okay with it that I'll hear in my head, oh my God, I'm so competitive today. What is that? And it's not like it doesn't register as I'm a bad person. When you realize you're 50-50, and I think everyone's 50-50, and that's a realization. We're not a great person, we're not a hero, we're not a victim, all of that. And you just go, oh, this is today I'm very competitive. In fact, in comedy, that's funnier to be like I've always said in comedy, my job is to make bigger mistakes than you do so you can laugh at mine and feel better about yours. So when you call that about what a jerk I was, that's the greatest like connection because everyone was like, "Oh, I was a jerk too, and if she did it, I can do it," you know?
Yeah, I think I have found with my whole process that I've been going through for about, I guess maybe about 3 years, um, naming my stuff and being curious has been very helpful to me. So when I first came on the podcast with a hat on and people don't normally see me like that, I just named it and was like, yeah, I'm trying to go gray. And I'm like, I'm going to play with this hat instead of like worrying what someone's going to say. Let me just talk about it. Let me just name it. Let me just talk about it. If I struggle and I was doing breath work last night in Old Forge and had a beautiful session, and I always hit the song. I use it on my phone, and then I get like in my own process, and then I like the song is gonna crescendo, and don't I hit pause or switch the song and through the speaker. And so I always like laugh at myself at the end, and so that I feel less shame about it, less
Mhm.
guilt or judgment, because I would normally like spin out of control. I'm like, God, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? But now I'm just like, I'm human. Like,
Mhm.
I get crazy. I like they're breathing and I'm like got my eyes closed and I'm in my process. I can feel everybody's energy. And then don't I hit the button? I know I'm gonna do it. I try not to do it, but it's almost laughable now because I do it like every 3 sessions. Like I do it for 2 sessions, I don't do it, and then I'll get to a 3rd session and I'll be like, and last night in this perfect spot, because this perfect spot is that I'm like also feeling it. And then I hit the button and I thought to myself, "Oh, here we go again, Sally. Perfect timing." But then I talk about it after. I don't make a deal about it, but I almost like laugh. So if they're thinking about it, it almost like keeps everybody at ease because
Mhm.
and it isn't about me wanting to laugh at myself before you laugh at me. It's almost like it's funny. It's like funny. I made a mistake. It's not the end of the world. But in life, before this, I thought it was the end of the world. Like I thought it was the end of
Mhm.
the world if someone laughed at me or made fun of me or even just had a different opinion than mine because I thought that they were attacking me because their opinion wasn't the same, which is not true. It's just their opinion. We just don't
And
agree.
that's the big one that's tearing us apart.
Yeah, because we don't think that we can live in this world. We think it has to be right or wrong, black or white. We can't live in the duality or the thought that we can both be right. We just have different opinions.
Yeah.
We can be
Yeah.
different religions and we can both it can both be okay. We can have a different opinion. We can think differently about how medicine should be practiced. Whatever the case may be. There's a million things, right? But we can both be right, and can we be curious around that other person's thoughts. It doesn't mean we have to take on their thoughts, but can we be curious and be like, "Hmm, interesting." Curious has been a word that I've used the last year, and it really has been a lifesaver for me because when I start to get that judgy, I call her Judy, when she comes out, that piece of me, because she is a piece of my inner child that comes out, and when she starts to feel unsure and unsettled, she comes out and she's going to judge you before you can judge me. And now I just have a chat with her and I'm like, okay, Judy, maybe we should be curious about this. Like, what are they really saying? And is this an attack on me? Is this really what they said? Or is this me feeling a little certain way? And when you start to become friendly with your inner child and your parts that have been protecting you for many years and served you, we don't want to shame them. They're part of us, right? Like you said, it's not
Mhm.
50. There's so many fragmented pieces of me and I don't feel broken anymore. I feel like they're there and I need to like love on them and bring them in and talk to them where someone didn't do that with me, right? As
Right.
a kid, someone didn't. They shamed me. And so then I felt that. And then I was listen, we could talk all day about. I mean, I was such an introverted when you said but introvert extrovert, I feel the same way. I was so introverted as a kid, as a young child. They thought I was like sickly in school. They were like, "What is wrong with
Mhm.
her? She doesn't speak. She doesn't. She's always a little sick." And then in my household too, I had to learn how to survive. So then I became more, and now people would be like, "She's not introverted," but I still am in certain arenas. Um, but I think the podcast and the things that we end up choosing to do gives us a place and a platform for our voice to be heard and really weirdly sometimes I don't want to do a workshop online because I feel like whatever judged, but then I launched a podcast, but I feel like I can just talk whatever. It's my podcast. I can have whatever. People tried to tell me I had to do certain things and I was like, I don't know, it's my podcast. I don't have to do anything because people will either listen or they won't, and it'll either go somewhere or it won't, and that's fine. But I, for once in my life, have a platform to be able to speak about whatever I feel and find people that I want to hear what they have to say also as I get more curious about how the world, how we need to heal and connect better in the
Mhm.
world.
Yeah, and this is one of the, like you were saying, this is one of the positive things about this is one of the positive things about the internet and stuff like that. And sometimes, it's weird because I do the scrolling a lot too. And like last week I needed mind mush. The stress was so much that the mind mush of scrolling was okay. But a weird thing is, in my mom's dementia, I don't know if she ran out of dopamine, but she's sad all the time. And the only thing that cheers her up is we sit down and watch funny animal videos on TikTok, and it's like heaven to her. So it's everything is that double-edged sword of how are you using it?
Right. Right. And how are you taking, that mindless Netflix afternoon and just or are you laying on the couch for 2 weeks and
Mhm.
mindlessly watching Netflix? And where is the boundary and where does it start to cross the line of, like, you need to get a little motivated, you need to, like, crank up your will chakra, you need maybe something else, right, to get
Yeah.
because 'cause I've been in all those places. And so my husband will say to me sometimes, like, "If you're tired, just go to bed." And that triggers me because my mom would, you weren't allowed to lay on the couch. So I'm like, I'm an adult. I'm a 59-year-old woman. And honestly, if I want to watch Law and Order tonight, even though that's not like the most uplifting show, that's my mush. Like that's my reality TV. Like I might want to watch a little reality TV and that's my mush. And sometimes I do need that.
Yeah. And there's an
I don't need to
interesting.
live in it though. Like I shouldn't be
Yep.
living in it. I shouldn't be scrolling and comparing myself all day. But if I want to watch funny TikToks or see something and then send it to a friend because it's so funny and I lose myself for an hour, like to stop shaming ourselves around that and just having everything in moderation.
I have a theory about that too. And this is where we get into like Law and Order is not good or bad, because I used to have very bad nightmares. But I found, weirdly enough, if every once in a while I watch a horror movie, no nightmares. So that's even I'm sure I'm not trying to promote horror movies, but that puts that fear in a different place. And so if law and order, I think that the reason that women, they always joke about how women like the true crime and sort of I think that it gives them a sense of power. And if it's doing that on a reasonable level, there's nothing wrong with it. Men don't realize how much fear women have to live in. And I don't mean that we don't have to live in fear. We have to live in awareness. We
Right.
have to live in awareness. And if that makes someone feel stronger, then that's its purpose. There isn't a good or bad.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I know. And so I will say, like, this is before I would be argue about that or be aggravated or get like feel judged. But now I just say this is my process. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't
And if
wanna
it
do it, that's fine, but I need to, like, if you're gonna sit in here and Twitter in my ear about it, don't. I just need to, like, decompress. Um,
and
yeah,
Law
I
and
was
Order is
just
a good
away
show.
for a retreat. I ran a retreat in Arizona, in Sedona, and it was the first retreat I ran with a good friend of mine, and we co-facilitated for this first time. We held 12 women. It was amazing. It was exceeded my expectations of what I thought I was gonna be able to do. It was so beautiful, but when I got home, I was tired. Like,
Hmm.
you're holding space for people for 12 hours. I'm sure when you're performing, it's the same thing. You're kind of on, and especially if you're performing, even if you love it, because someone had said to me, "Well, would you not hold another retreat?" I said, "No, of course I would. I loved it, but I'm starting to learn more about my own body and what my body's capable of, and I need downtime after holding space for people for 5 days. Like, I need
Yeah.
to have, and I'm sure, and I say I'm sure, but I don't know, like, you probably have a process for when you're on the road a lot and you're performing, because when you're performing, you're on and you're preparing. Even if you love it, that doesn't mean you don't need to give yourself space to decompress, and that's
Yes.
different for different people, which is perfectly fine because we think it has to look one way, just like we think self-development has to look one way, and it doesn't. It's really about connecting to your own body, your own wisdom, what feels good for you, and getting in tune with that. And if morning meditation works for me, it may not work for you because
Mhm.
slowing down for you too much into a meditation makes you feel a little bit more unsafe if that feels unsafe for you. So you can't like force people, um, just like when I did breath work, locally the other day, and, I have these new friends that have been just loving my breath work and bringing all their friends in, and it's been amazing, amazing experiences, but somebody came and they didn't like it, and so my new friend was like, "I can't believe she didn't like it," and I said, "But it's not for everybody." Like,
Well, that
everybody's
might
in
have
a
triggered
different
something.
place. Everybody's
Yeah.
in a different place. Her body may not be ready to go
And
there.
she might come back in 3 years and be like, I can't believe I didn't love this. What
Right,
happened?
right.
Yeah.
And
And,
when
and,
you And when you become so confident, not confident, but I guess confident in like what I know the healing modalities, I know the healing that can happen with somatic breath work and some of these other things, and getting connection with your body. But everybody is not there. And it's very hard to
Mhm.
explain the safety in the body when someone's not even open yet. And that's not a judgment, that's just fact.
Yeah.
And we need to take people slow. Like, people need to know it's okay if they didn't like it, they felt uncomfortable. That's perfectly fine. Don't
And it is a little uncomfortable, but that's how you power through. And
right.
that's how I feel about I've done ayahuasca twice and it's not for everybody. If you have real control issues, that's not going to be your thing, and that's okay. There is no fix all for any one person. Or I guess I would say a certain type of control issues, because I have my control issues. They
Mhm.
just didn't like to that. I could surrender. That one I was okay with. But, it's talking about, and this is something we don't look at, which is, it's not like it's not just about, it's energetically, how do I feel right now? Because the bigger, I love comedy, sort of gives me energy, but tarot is a very strict concentration that can be very draining. And to say I can't jump up and do five, I used to be able to do 5 appointments a day, I can't do that anymore because of how much energy you're putting out. And that's something we don't think of. I know that we think, am I tired? But there's a different thing about being energetically, like you holding that space for
Mhm.
12 people. That's exhausting. Like you have to replenish from that. I can't
Right.
imagine from doing this the my tarot appointments, I know what that's like. It's a different kind of tired, and people need to be more in tune with that. That's another one that we sort of don't talk about. And I no longer say male or female. I say patriarchy or matriarchy because there's a lot of women in the patriarchy keeping it going too, and there's a
Right.
lot of men in the matriarchy making things better. But that's one of those things, like emotionally tired. Can you imagine calling in sick because you're emotionally tired? The world would explode. What are you
I know.
talking about?
I
But
know.
it's a real thing.
And if you've come from that patriarchal, I mean, I came from a house where you work hard and then you're rewarded. And I was a hard worker and then continued to, perform for like that external validation and perform and perform and perform, until I realized my body started to shut down and say, like, this isn't really working for you anymore. And there was a million signs ahead of that, but I completely ignored them. And
Yeah.
so even with the breath work, I think if everybody leaves and has a beautiful experience, that's great. But if one person leaves and just has a slight more connection with their intuition or their body, um, then it's a win because it might just plant the seed for them to be like, oh, I don't know how I felt about that. Maybe I'll come back. But that's why I talk about some of those things, inner child and body and
Hmm.
safety, because I just want to drop those seeds and plant them. I don't want to like preach, but I want to drop those seeds because I didn't like to be preached to. Oh god, if someone was preaching to me, I would definitely be resistant. So I like to plant seeds now, I call them. And the energy, I agree. Like I even still am guilty of saying just I'm tired, but really it's the energy, right? Like I have to know if
Hmm.
I'm going to perform, my energy has to be clean to go do a breathwork session with people because I'm bringing my energy into the room. The energy in the when we held space for 12 women, we had some hiccups when we first got to the venue, of course, because we had never been
Always.
there before. Always is gonna happen. Like, I was kinda mentally prepared, but then when it happened, I wasn't completely prepared because you don't wanna disappoint your people that have paid you to come, right? But we knew, because we're both healers, that energetically, as pissed off as we were and as disappointed in some things that we were, that we had to figure out how to get through them, and we had to clean our energy before these 12 women walked through the door, and we couldn't bring that. And in fact, the woman that owned the venue, I won't even get into that, but she was doing a healing ceremony for us. And then we had to think about, like, how is that going to work? Like, but we basically said the women that are coming are looking forward to this. And we have to hope that what just occurred is not going to affect her healing session. And then we were debating, do we even go to the healing session, not out of spite, but out of like, will any of our negative energy come into there? So we kind of settled with ourselves. I mean, literally, we had whole conversations with ourselves and each other without anyone knowing. And then we ended up participating. It was beautiful. It was healing with horses. I had a most amazing experience with
Hmm.
this horse. And I really had to like almost like shut that piece out and just be open to what the healer was bringing. And we had to make sure. And a lot of people will say, oh, that's a lot of woo, but we're made up of energy.
Hmm.
Right. So we talk about it in tiredness or aggravation or frustration, but it's our like it's our now I'm learning it's like stuck energy, or I just don't have the capacity. Like I build my capacity, but when you're doing healing work or tarot reading or any of this stuff, you have to have that capacity
Yeah.
because your people are going to feel that. The women coming in would have felt if we were off. They wouldn't have known what they were feeling, but they would have felt our energy being off. We didn't have to be, like, aggravated or anything. They would have just felt it.
And
And I know that
and
now,
I
so you have to work that.
don't know that situation at all or that person. And also, that may literally be that this person is a great healer, horrible business person.
Right,
Like, we kind of expect everybody to be everything.
right.
And it's like, okay, that's not her bag. This is her bag. I'm
Mhm.
glad I saw that this is what it's about. This is why she opened this place, because she's good at this, but maybe she could use some help here, you know?
Right, right, and that is kinda how we were like, "Okay, we're gonna hope for the best with this healing," and it was. I think people got a beautiful experience. I personally got a beautiful experience, so that was a lesson for me, and, I took it away just as a lesson, and I just won't go back there, but it's unfortunate because it really was a beautiful space. There was just pieces about it, but we did not want that to transfer to the women that were coming. That would have been more detrimental than the space not being exactly what we expected if we didn't step up and take responsibility for our part and whatever our lesson was when we went in there and, clear our own energy because we are both energy healers. So like that's our job too, is to make sure our energy is good. And so, yeah, so when I came home, I knew I was going to be tired.
Yeah, exhausted, exhausted, and it's a really interesting thing because I would say that would be a place you wouldn't play a horror movie because everybody's like open and you know what I mean? So that's your job as I did go to a yoga retreat once and they locked us in a room and forced us to watch a movie called Earthlings, which was about animal abuse to tell us all now you can't unsee it. Are you vegan or not? Which I still think was the wrong. Like I would
Yeah.
never do that to anyone. I did become vegan and I stayed vegan, so maybe they win. But it was a horrible
I
thing to
think
put.
there's something about free will
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
very important to me in my practice, letting people know that I'm just a guide. And I had a lady last night in breath work, and she had a very different experience than she had a couple weeks ago. And she came in differently, like, and I didn't, I'm not aware of everything that people are bringing in.
yeah,
And she probably should have slowed down during the breath, which I instruct people to do. But, people still, we have those things we want to keep up, we want to do it. And so she just needed to slow down. So we talked about that after, because you always have free will. I always want my clients or my people, my breathwork people, or whoever, you have free will. Like we
yeah,
shouldn't feel compelled to watch that movie and be locked in a room to watch that movie to turn vegans. Because to me, again, that's excess.
yeah. That's well,
They
yeah.
could
I
give you
would not.
facts and then you decide whether you want to be vegan or not. Like they could
Oh,
give you the
I yeah.
movie and say, what, would you be interested in watching this? Because this is some of what happens. And then you decide whether you're going to watch the movie. But so for
And
me,
I
like,
did, yeah, I did not go back to their yoga or another retreat, and I got a lot of good out of it. But that is, yeah, that's yeah, it was I still believe that was very, very wrong. So, I would never do that. I would never even ask someone else to become vegan, even with a mate. That has to be their choice, or maybe they think completely different. Some vegans really don't like me because I think if a hunter kills a deer and eats it and uses all of it, I'm actually kind of okay with that. It's the other stuff. So everybody's
right.
got their own thing, but I would never do that to anyone about anything.
Yeah, I think planting seeds and allowing people to make their own decisions. And then again, the free will piece is so important to me because I feel this is where we run into trouble because people just have an idea and they're very stuck on their idea only being the only right way. And is there really
Yes.
only one right way?
And there isn't. And everybody's different and everybody's got a different path. That's why all you can do is this is what I do. And if it works for, you might say, hey, how come that's working out so good for you? I'll try that. People might be like, no, that's not for me. It's all different. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
we are really getting into that time of being with others and yet hearing ourselves.
Right. Right. I know you're on a time and we are like at your time. And so honestly, um, I really have to have you come back and talk
I'd love to.
your paranormal because I really want to hear how you got into that and how you ended up with a comedy. And for our listeners today, this was not the plan, but like I love to run this organic, like woohoo, whatever. And so this is what happens sometimes. I think our conversation was amazing though. So much
I love it.
insight about what really what's going on in the world and how it can be different and the community and owning our freedom. I think a lot of freedom
And
today.
giving people the courage to let their hair grow gray.
Courage to let my hair go gray. Oh my God. I swim with sharks, but I'm gonna, yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It makes you start to think. But anyway, so Karen, thank you so much. I definitely would love you to come back because I really want to share with my
Absolutely.
audience about your paranormal and how you got into comedy and your stuff in LA because I think you have like a really rich life to share. And I'm sure a lot of fun stories. But thank you so much for spending all this time with me today. It
Thank
was
you.
amazing. And I'm going to share all Karen's information. She is going to be on the road, but she does local stuff. She does tarot reading. She has a Patreon. She has all the things and so many ways to get in touch with her. So I'm going to share all that. And this episode is going to be coming up shortly. So thank you
Great.
so much from my heart and love chatting.